A battered German shepherd limped alone through the teeth of a blizzard, no collar, no sound, just pain in his eyes and blood melting into the snow. Most drivers swerved, most people looked away, but not Deputy Elias Ward. New to the small mountain town of Cedar Hollow, Elias was still shadowed by memories of a partner he couldn't save. On this desolate stretch of highway twisting up through Whispering Ridge, his patrol SUV screeched to a stop. He stepped out into the storm, unaware that what followed would uncover a secret prison, a missing officer long presumed dead, and a bond that would challenge orders, time, and fear itself. Cedar Hollow, Montana, October 24th, 4:47 p.m. The storm came sudden, no warning. One moment the pines stood still under a leaden sky, the next, they were swallowed by white. Heavy flakes fell sideways in the wind, clinging to branches, swirling over the narrow switchbacks of Old Timberline Pass. Locals stayed inside. The hearths burned higher. But Elias didn't have that choice. At 29, the former Marine turned small-town deputy was on patrol, alone in the silence that blanketed the world like frost. Behind the wheel, he downshifted into low gear. His windshield wipers fought the storm with mechanical defiance. The police radio offered nothing but static. No calls, no backup. Elias Ward wasn't a man who showed much, tall, sinewy, eyes like dusk. His military past had carved him into calm under fire. But inside, fatigue pooled in the quiet spaces where sleep never stayed long. He'd arrived in Cedar Hollow just 3 weeks prior. The transfer request had come after a failed bureau sting along the East Coast docks, a botched operation known only by the codename Stonewatch. His file was thin. His ghosts were not. Special Agent Delia Knox had been more than his bureau partner. She'd been the one person who understood his instincts before he acted. The last time he heard her voice was over a comm link, whispering about a mole in their own division, moments before she vanished beneath a barrage of gunfire and silence. The bureau closed her file. Missing. Presumed dead. Elias had never accepted it. He hadn't forgiven them. Or himself. The snowfall thickened. Visibility dropped. As he rounded a bend near Crooked Elm Summit, his headlights cut through the haze and revealed a shadow. He slowed. There, dead center in the road, stood a large German shepherd. Soaked, trembling, but unmoving. Elias braked hard. The SUV skidded slightly, tires protesting the ice beneath. Wind screamed past as he leaned closer, peering through the snow-dappled windshield. The shepherd's coat, a matted blur of black and tan, clung tight to his gaunt frame. One rear leg curled upward, favoring a limp. A crust of dried blood marred his side. He didn't bark, didn't cower. He just stood, ears upright, tail lowered, amber eyes fixed squarely on Elias. Something ancient stirred in Elias' chest. Most people would have honked or veered. Elias stepped out of the SUV. The blizzard swallowed him whole. His boots crunched into the snow as he raised a hand. "Hey there, boy," he called softly. "You hurt?" No response, just the stare. Elias knelt slowly, hands out. "You're bleeding. Let me help." The shepherd turned, limped 2 steps, paused, looked back, then again, 2 steps, pause, look. Elias understood. This wasn't a stray. This was something else. He hesitated, glanced back at the warm truck, the useless radio, then followed the German shepherd into the woods. The snow muffled everything, footsteps, breath, even thought, as Elias Ward followed the injured German shepherd into the trees. They moved slowly, deeper into the cold woods beyond Old Timberline Pass. The dog's limp was uneven but purposeful, each stride deliberate. It wasn't instinct that guided him, it was memory. Duty. The forest here was old, the kind that held silence like a secret. Towering firs leaned in close together, dusted with snow. Their branches hung low, sagging under the weight of the storm. The air was thick with pine, frost, and something else, unease. Elias felt it too, that tightening just under his ribs, the same kind of warning he'd known in war zones and stings gone wrong. This place hadn't seen footsteps in days, maybe weeks, but it didn't feel empty. The dog kept going, pausing only when Elias slowed, his breath heavy in the thin mountain air. He crossed a shallow creek, its ice cracking under Elias' boots. They passed over a rise, under low-hanging branches, and down into a narrow fold between two boulders, a ravine half hidden from above. Then the shepherd stopped. His paw scratched urgently at a mound beneath a twisted cedar, snow giving way to reveal something dark and unnatural. Elias dropped beside him and swept snow aside with gloved hands. What emerged was a black tactical beacon, military grade, scratched and frostbitten. The battery casing was cracked, the strap torn. But Elias recognized it instantly. His breath caught. Carved faintly into the casing, almost worn smooth by time and friction, were the letters, D. Knox. He swallowed hard. He hadn't spoken her name in 6 months, not since the Bureau filed her as a casualty, not since they'd buried the case beneath bureaucracy and lies. This beacon, Delia's off-grid locator, was one of the few tools issued for Black Ops-level infiltration. She had requested it personally just weeks before she disappeared. Paranoia, she'd said. She didn't trust their comms, or their commanding officer, Assistant Director Miles Rourke. Elias had brushed off her warnings then. Rourke was polished, clean-cut, unshakable. A man built for Capitol Hill hearings, not dark alley busts. But Delia had insisted something was off. Rourke plays too clean, she'd whispered. No one's that clean unless they're hiding the dirt. Now Elias wasn't so sure she was wrong. The shepherd sat beside him in the snow, panting, his flank still bleeding. Elias gently touched the dog's side. You brought me here, didn't you? The dog said nothing, just looked up with those burning, intelligent eyes. Elias stood, scanning the woods. There were no other footprints, no drag marks, no signs of a recent scuffle. But the beacon hadn't been there long. It wasn't buried beneath the deeper snowfall. Someone had left it. Someone who didn't want it found, but not far from where they'd taken Delia. Elias reached for his radio. Static screamed in his ear. Nothing. Dead channel. He clenched his jaw, slid the beacon into his coat pocket, and turned to the shepherd. Let's get you help, he murmured. Then we figure out what the hell is going on. They began the long, cold climb out of the ravine. Elias' thoughts were a blur of images. The ambush at the docks, Delia's final whisper, the surveillance footage Rourke sealed, the transfer order to Cedar Hollow signed the next day. He'd thought the town was exile. Now he wondered, had Delia been sent here too? Or had she never left? He looked at the shepherd again. No bark, no whine, just the quiet stare of a soul still carrying a mission. You know where she is, don't you? Still, the dog didn't move. But Elias didn't need an answer. He felt it. He made a silent vow. He would come back to this place, and he wouldn't come alone. That night, as the storm slowed and Cedar Hollow fell under a blanket of fresh snow, Elias sat in the dim warmth of his two-room rental cabin at the edge of town. His coat lay on the back of a chair, wet and dirty. On the table before him, a chipped mug of gas station coffee gone cold, and the beacon, still slick with melted ice. Shadow, the name that now seemed right for the shepherd, lay curled on a folded blanket nearby. His breathing was shallow but steady. Elias had cleaned and dressed the dog's wound using the kit in his cruiser. Shadow hadn't resisted. He had simply watched, like he understood that Elias was the only one left who still remembered. When Elias moved to the couch, Shadow followed. When Elias closed his eyes for an hour of restless sleep, Shadow pressed close, twitching in dreams that sounded like memory. By midnight, Elias was awake again. He reached for the beacon, turned it over in his hands. The damage was intentional, a clean strike to the circuitry. Someone had tried to destroy it, and that meant they were hiding something. Delia never did anything without a plan. He walked to the bookshelf, pulled out a battered case file, Operation Stonewatch. It was mostly redacted, but a few pages remained, her notes, a photo of the warehouse blueprint, and a folded terrain map. He spread it out under the kitchen light. Shadow lifted his head, ears twitching, but didn't move. And there, along the map's northern edge, barely visible beneath a crease, was a hand-drawn red line. It led beyond the docks, into the mountain foothills. At the end of the line, a single red X, beside it, scribbled in Delia's familiar handwriting. Old Shelter, North Spire Woods. Elias stared. North Spire. A Cold War relic, half forgotten, mostly buried. Rumors claimed the government had built fallout shelters there, most sealed, most unlisted. He took a photo of the map with his phone and folded it again, carefully. Behind him, Shadow whimpered faintly in his sleep. Elias knelt beside him, hand resting gently on the dog's back. "You waited, didn't you?" he said softly. "All this time." He didn't expect a reply. He didn't need one. He looked at the photograph tucked between two files, Delia, dressed in dark bureau gear, her face half smile and half discomfort, and sitting obediently beside her. Shadow. Younger. Stronger. Wearing his tactical vest like it was armor. Elias flipped the photo. On the back, in Delia's careful writing, "To the one who listens better than you. D." He looked at the German shepherd now sleeping at his feet. "You never left her." In the morning, they would head for North Spire. They didn't have authorization. They didn't need it. Dawn broke reluctantly over Cedar Hollow. The sky hung heavy with clouds, and the mountains around North Spire Woods still glistened with untouched powder. Elias Ward stood at the edge of the Cedar Hollow Sheriff's Department, his uniform jacket already frosted with snow. He sipped bitter coffee from a dented thermos and clutched a folder stuffed with photos and notes. Inside, a red-marked map, a broken locator beacon, and a faded photo of Delia Knox standing beside a younger Shadow. The station buzzed with sleepy activity. Deputy Rowan Park, early 20s, always optimistic and a little too green, offered him a polite nod. Behind the main desk, Acting Chief Marion Griggs sat with her usual intensity, a woman whose kindness had been honed by loss, her son buried in a war the country barely remembered. Elias stepped into her office and laid the folder on the desk. Requesting a single-agent search operation. North Spire Woods, one-day clearance, no backup required. Chief Griggs didn't even look up. That region's black-zoned unless you've got a signed missing persons form or a confirmed distress signal. You've got neither. I've got a destroyed tracker from a closed case, a wounded K-9, and a map marked by someone the Bureau gave up on. Delia Knox didn't vanish into thin air. Someone buried her trail, literally. She finally looked up, her face unreadable. "You want me to clear a lone officer into abandoned federal land based on a hunch and a bleeding dog?" "No," Elias said. "I'm telling you I'm going. With or without approval." The room stilled. Chief Griggs stared at him, eyes narrowing, but not in anger. In recognition. She saw something in him, the same haunted determination that had driven her own son once. Finally, she sighed. "You get hurt out there, no one's coming. You disappear, you stay disappeared. Understood?" Elias gave a single nod. She didn't sign anything. She didn't stop him either. By mid-morning, Elias and Shadow were deep in North Spire. The trees here grew twisted, older. Half-forgotten trails were buried beneath fallen branches and 3 feet of snow. Wind rattled between trunks like old ghosts. Shadow moved ahead, his gait still uneven but purposeful. His harness carried medical supplies and a bottle of water. He paused occasionally to sniff the air, ears swiveling, nose tracking. 3 hours in, Elias stopped, checked his map, checked the terrain. He was close. They crested a shallow ridge, now matching the markings on Delia's map. Below it, a crescent-shaped clearing sloped downward toward a frozen stream. Shadow slowed, then stopped entirely. He turned toward a crooked pine, lowered his snout to a snow-covered mound, and began to dig. Elias joined him, clearing snow away with gloved hands until his fingers struck something hard and cold, metal. Together, they revealed a square steel hatch, camouflaged by earth and time. The hinges were rusted. The lock had been broken clean through. Elias stared at it. This wasn't a ranger shelter. This wasn't even on the county's emergency maps. He gripped the handle and pulled. The hatch groaned, then gave way. A wave of air swept up from below, rank with rot, metal, and blood. Elias clicked on his flashlight and descended the short ladder. The space below was crude, concrete walls, exposed wires, shelves sagging under rust and mold, a cracked folding chair, a splintered crate. The air was sharp and cold as bone. Then his beam landed on something near the floor. A torn patch, the Bureau's insignia, and next to it, an empty medical syringe. But that wasn't what made Elias freeze. It was the dark, drying stain streaked across the lower wall. Blood. Human. Violent. Recent. His chest tightened. She'd been here. He crouched, picking up the patch. Her initials were faintly stenciled on the corner. D.K. Above, Shadow whimpered faintly from the hatch. He refused to come down, wouldn't enter the space. And Elias understood why. This place didn't just feel abandoned, it felt violated. Delia hadn't just been detained, she'd been interrogated, maybe worse. Elias turned back toward the entrance and climbed out into the cold again. Shadow leaned into him as he emerged. She was here, Elias said under his breath. And Shadow didn't need the words, he already knew. Elias scanned the woods, something gnawed at him. The hatch wasn't that buried, the blood wasn't that old, and the tracker hadn't been out in the snow for more than a day or two. This place was still active. He reached for his radio. Nothing, just static. He flipped frequencies, still nothing. His stomach turned. This wasn't a dead zone. It was jammed. A decision, not a glitch. Elias turned slowly, surveying the ridge line. His military instincts took over. Someone was watching. Shadow went rigid. His head swiveled toward a nearby tree stump. And there, tucked just inside a knot of bark, was a lens. A small black camera, no larger than a coin, aimed directly at the bunker hatch. Someone had eyes on them. Now. Right now. Elias reached for his sidearm. That's when the shot rang out. The crack echoed like thunder. Elias dove behind a tree just in time. Shadow barked once, a sharp cry of warning, then yelped. Blood hit the snow. The shepherd had lunged between Elias and the shooter. The bullet struck Shadow square in the shoulder. Elias fired blindly toward the ridge, buying seconds, then dove toward the dog. Stay with me, he whispered, panic surging. He pressed gauze and a scarf into the wound, wrapping it tight. The bleeding was fast, but not fatal. Not yet. They had to move. Now. Whoever had pulled that trigger wasn't trying to scare them off. They were cleaning up. Elias gathered Shadow in his arms, cradling the dog's weight as he pushed west, away from the bunker, away from the line of sight, into thicker brush. His boots slipped on ice. His coat tore on branches. His breath came hard and fast. But he didn't stop. Somewhere back in the woods, a cover-up was unraveling. And now, someone was willing to kill to keep it buried. They found shelter under an overhang, a natural rock formation curved like a cave. It blocked the wind and gave them cover. Elias laid Shadow down gently, his coat folded beneath the shepherd's trembling body. You held on this long, he whispered. You're not stopping now. Outside, the light faded into dusk. Then, a sound. Not snow. Not wind. A voice. Soft. Weak. Human. Help. Elias froze. He stepped to the cave's edge, ears straining. It came again, just above the howl of wind. Please. A whisper. Broken. Real. He turned back once toward Shadow, then grabbed his flashlight and followed the sound. It led him down a slope, into denser trees. His light bounced off ice and pine. Then, he saw it. Another metal grate, different from the hatch before. This one wasn't for storage. It was for containment. He dropped to his knees, brushed away the snow, and pulled. The grate creaked upward. A ladder descended into darkness. Elias took one breath, then climbed down. The air was thick, stale, metallic. His flashlight caught it all. A cot in the corner. A metal bucket. Chains. A flickering overhead bulb. A woman, collapsed but alive, curled in the shadows. Delia. She lifted her head, face pale and hollow, but her eyes, those stubborn eyes, still burned. Elias, you came. Elias. Her voice was barely there, cracked, dry, but alive. Delia Knox blinked against the harsh light of his flashlight. Her face was thinner than Elias remembered, her skin pale beneath grime and bruising. Her hair hung in tangled knots, her wrists raw from restraints. But her eyes, tired as they were, still burned with that stubborn intelligence he'd relied on for years. He dropped to her side. You're alive. Barely, she rasped, trying to sit upright but collapsing against the cot's rusted frame. Took you long enough. He checked the chains bolted to the floor. One had rusted through, the other snapped when he pulled hard. He caught her as she slumped forward. Who did this to you? Delia's breath rattled in her chest. She coughed, wiped blood from the corner of her mouth. Rourke, she whispered. He's not just leaking intel. He built the whole pipeline. Elias froze. He's been using bureau operations to smuggle product, guns, drugs, Through raids we're running ourselves. Cleans the scene, then slips the rest out through black channels. And when I found out, she gestured weakly around her. He made sure no one ever would. Her fingers fumbled for something beneath the cot. She scraped aside floor dust until they revealed a narrow seam in the concrete. From it, she pulled a leather-bound notebook, water-damaged and torn. Didn't find this, she muttered. They took everything else, but not this. Elias flipped it open. Names, codes, times, drop sites, bureau safehouse locations, maps, symbols, years of fieldwork documented in meticulous shorthand. Proof. Delia swayed, nearly losing consciousness. He caught her again. We're getting out, Elias said. She gripped his coat. Wait, Shadow? Elias hesitated. He's hurt, took a bullet, but he's alive. Tears welled in her eyes. She nodded, voice shaking. He stayed? All this time. Her knees buckled. Elias lifted her, one arm around her waist. She could barely walk, but every step was powered by something deeper than muscle, a promise to finish what they started. They climbed the ladder slowly, emerging into the frigid air above the hidden cell. The sun had vanished. The forest had darkened into jagged silhouettes of snow and trees. Elias led her back to the rock overhang. The cold bit deeper now. Inside, Shadow stirred at the sound of their approach. Delia collapsed beside him, her hand trembling as she reached for the shepherd's ears. I knew you'd keep watch, she whispered. Shadow's tail thumped faintly. Good boy. They stayed there until nightfall wrapped the woods in blackness so complete, it felt like the world had shrunk around them. Elias didn't rest. He kept his eyes on the tree-line, ears on the wind. He had no idea if the shooter had retreated or regrouped, but he knew one thing. They weren't safe. Not yet. With Delia leaning heavily against his shoulder and Shadow limping just ahead, Elias led them deeper into the woods, toward the one trail he remembered from Bureau wilderness training, one that would eventually lead them toward Timberline Ranger Station, an old outpost still standing beyond the ridgeline. The hike was brutal. Delia's strength failed often. Shadow collapsed more than once, his injured leg dragging. Elias carried them both, sometimes alternating between the two, sometimes dragging them by sheer will. He didn't stop. He couldn't, because somewhere behind them, a machine was still running, one that buried agents, doctored reports, and eliminated witnesses, and because now, they had the key to break it. Just after 3 a.m., they broke through a frozen thicket and emerged into a clearing. Timberline Pass glowed dimly in the moonlight, and beyond it, a clearing wide enough for what Elias had been hoping to find. A helicopter. Its searchlight swept across the forest, once, then again, blinding white as it found them. Elias dropped to one knee, waving his arms, flashing the signal light clipped to his belt. Delia slumped forward, nearly unconscious. Shadow whimpered softly, still walking but barely. The chopper circled, then began to descend. Snow swirled in wild loops from its blades. Two figures dropped from its open hatch, both in cold-weather tactical gear. The first, a stocky woman with braided black hair and precise eyes, reached Elias first. You Elias Ward? She shouted over the blades. He nodded. 2 down. 1 shot. 1 collapsed. Get them warm. Fast. The second rescuer, a slim man with a calm voice and eyes too kind for this job, lifted Delia gently into his arms. We've got her. The woman, Lieutenant Marissa Kent, dropped to her knees beside Shadow. This dog took a bullet? He saved both of us, Elias said hoarsely. Then he flies with us, she said. Minutes later, they were airborne. Elias sat in the rear, coat wrapped around Delia's shoulders. Shadow's head rested in his lap. Delia's hand gripped Elias under the blanket. Not tightly, but firmly enough to mean something. Below them, the forest disappeared into shadow. So did the pass. By sunrise, Cedar Hollow's regional hospital was crawling with federal agents, police vehicles, and media vans. The emergency wing had been shut down and converted into an impromptu secure debrief site. Elias stayed with Delia the entire time. She spoke for over 6 hours, detailing her capture, the network she uncovered, and every player she could name. Her notebook backed every claim. So did the beacon. So did the camera footage Elias had quietly grabbed from the pine tree. That evening, the warrant was signed. Assistant Director Miles Rourke was arrested in his office. Alongside him, 2 federal agents, a logistics manager, and an international shipping coordinator. Charges included conspiracy, trafficking, internal obstruction, attempted murder, and unlawful detainment of a federal officer. The media went into overdrive. But Elias didn't care about headlines. He cared about closure. 3 days later, outside the Cedar Hollow Veterinary Clinic, Elias stood with a cup of black coffee in one hand and a tightness in his chest he hadn't felt in years. Shadow lay inside, sedated and stitched, his shoulder freshly bandaged. The vet said the bullet had missed vital arteries by a whisper. "He'll walk again," she'd said. "Maybe even run." Delia stood beside Elias, bundled in an oversized coat, her eyes fixed on the window. "He never gave up," she said. "He never does," Elias replied. An hour later, Chief Marion Griggs pulled up in her faded cruiser. She stepped out holding a manila envelope. "Commendation paperwork," she said, offering it to Elias. "Medal of Valor. Special Field Recognition. Reinstatement request, too. Bureau wants you back." Elias stared at the envelope, then handed it back. "I don't want any of that." Griggs raised an eyebrow. "Then what do you want?" Elias exhaled. "A badge here. And a dog who comes home to me." She smiled faintly, tucking the envelope under her arm. "That, we can do." Spring came slowly to Cedar Hollow, thawing the snowdrifts inch by inch, softening the trail scars left by wind and storm. Meltwater filled the creeks, and wildflowers crept cautiously from the forest floor. Exactly 1 year had passed. 1 year since Shadow, the wounded German shepherd, limped into the road during a blizzard. 1 year since Deputy Elias Ward followed him into the trees, and into the truth. 1 year since Delia Knox was found alive beneath the frost. Now, just outside the town center, where an abandoned ranger station once stood, a new building had risen. Wood-framed and stone-trimmed, shaped like open arms. The Shadow Sanctuary. It wasn't large, just 2 wings and a central courtyard. One side served as a canine trauma rehabilitation center, for dogs retired from duty, rescued from cruelty, or simply forgotten. The other housed a therapy and outreach program for veterans, first responders, and children navigating emotional scars no one could see. The walls were lined with murals, paintings of dogs running through fields and forest paths. The biggest one showed a German shepherd curled beneath a tree, watchful and at peace. The real Shadow lay just beneath it, nestled on a thick hand-woven blanket, his body slower now, his coat streaked with gray. But his eyes still glowed, amber and aware. A small crowd had gathered for the sanctuary's public opening, neighbors, schoolchildren, retired officers, and more than a few dogs. Foldable tables held baked goods, handmade collars, donation jars filled with bills and coins. Among the crowd was a girl of about 9, pale, with long blonde hair and a sweatshirt 2 sizes too big. She moved quietly, spoke rarely. Her name was Ava. 6 weeks ago, she had been placed in her aunt's care after years of neglect and trauma. Since arriving, she hadn't spoken a complete sentence. Words had become something she feared. But every afternoon, she came to sit beside Shadow. And Shadow, as always, asked nothing of her. He simply stayed. Today, for the first time, Ava leaned forward, ran her fingers along the shepherd's side, and whispered, barely audible over the breeze, "I'm not scared anymore." A few steps away, Delia Knox watched with folded arms and a quiet smile tugging at her lips. Her recovery had been slow, but sure. She wore her hair shorter now, symbolic, in a way. She'd shed the weight of her past like inches of shadow. She didn't wear a badge anymore. She wore a blue fleece vest stitched with the words, Second Shadow, Program Director. Beside her stood Elias, now fully reassigned to Cedar Hollow PD. The badge on his chest was the same as always, but he carried it differently now. No longer as a burden. Now, as a choice. As the town mingled and the sanctuary buzzed with quiet energy, Chief Marion Griggs arrived last, as always. She wore her charcoal coat and that ever-practical bun, her arms full of small wooden plaques engraved with the names of donors, lost canines, and honored handlers. She gave Elias a single nod, the kind that said, "You did good." At the podium near the courtyard center, Delia stepped forward and adjusted the mic. The crowd settled. "I never thought I'd stand in front of people again," she began. Her voice was strong now. "And I never thought the one who would bring me back would have 4 legs, a bullet scar, and more patience than any of us deserved." Laughter rippled gently through the gathering. "This place," she continued, "was built for those who've walked through fire. Not just the people. The dogs, too. Every canine who comes here carries a story. A scar. A chapter they didn't get to finish. We're not here to fix them. We're here to stay with them." Then Elias stepped up. In his hand, a pair of ceremonial ribbon-cutting shears. He looked toward Shadow, still lying calmly in the grass. "You know," Elias said, "I used to think dogs were just trained to obey. But Shadow, he wasn't following orders. He was following a promise, a bond." He looked at Ava, still beside the shepherd. "If he's taught us anything, it's that healing doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes, it shows up nose first in the snow, with a heartbeat beside you in the dark." He cut the ribbon. The crowd clapped, not loud, but warm, like raindrops on a tin roof. The kind of applause you give when silence says more than sound ever could. Later, as the sun dipped behind the treetops and the sky turned gold, Elias sat beneath the mural tree with Shadow lying beside him. Delia joined him, a cup of cocoa in hand. "You ever think it would end like this?" she asked. Elias shook his head. "No. But I'm glad it did." Shadow exhaled a slow breath and rested his head on Elias' boot. "What's next?" Delia asked. "Tomorrow," Elias said, "we start training with a new rescue. Golden Retriever. Likes chewing boots." She chuckled. "He'll fit right in." The wind moved through the sanctuary trees like a whisper from the past, not a warning anymore, but a reminder. They'd made it home. If this story moved you, if Shadow's journey reminded you of the strength that lives in quiet loyalty and silent courage, don't scroll past. Tap that like button, comment with your favorite moment, share this story with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more true stories that light a fire in your soul. Because sometimes, the ones who save us can't speak, but they never stop trying.